And what's going on, Los Angeles, Bruin Nation, LAFB fam, your dynamic duo, the Thriller and Madman, back together again for all of your UCLA football needs. And man, do we have a fun episode here. Want to get my man Thriller's thoughts on all of this sort of coaching situation. UCLA feels like, they're on a Bumble app right now with the coaching here, particularly this week. We got Mr. Jed Fish in town. We got Mr. Chesney in terms of the conversation. So excited about getting all down into it with my main man. But first and foremost, Thriller, my brother from another mother. So great to see you. And here we are talking football. Hard to believe, Thriller. We're about 10 days from the end of the regular season. Unfortunately, no bowl game for us this year. So in 10 days, we're going to be back into the offseason, talking coaching, talking recruiting, talking all this as we continue to build up basketball as well. But, man, college football season is just too short, isn't it?
Always too short, man. And, it hasn't been the year we kind of hoped for with UCLA football, but a lot of optimism with this coaching search going on. You could make the right hire that puts us where Indiana's at right now. And I think if the fan base can rally around who we're looking at, there's one specific name that's been floated out by a very, very credible source, which you talked about yesterday, that looks very appealing. There's a very credible coaching candidate that's across our own sideline this weekend. But, dude, this might be the last game at the Rose Bowl. This is a big deal for UCLA fans. So, if you were ever going to pack a stadium for UCLA fans, this could be the last one. Make sure that tailgate is as crazy as ever this weekend for Washington, man. It's a sad state of affairs, but it sounds like we're trending towards SoFi. So
yeah, Thriller. So well said. And especially, a lot of things going on in the courts the last week and a half with the TROs and whatnot. And, the ruling was such that, at least for now, UCLA sort of free to move forward and assess their options. And prior to this sort of court interaction and this court ruling, so much of the conversation was UCLA's headspace was SoFi for 26. So well said, Thriller. What a symbolic week here, right? Potentially the last week in the Rose Bowl, potentially playing the coach who has had an eye on this job for a number of years, who you have your eye on. And then, oh, by the way, it's a week where another coaching candidate sort of emerges from the ashes and is a really hot conversation right now. The likes of Rick Neuheisel, the likes of Bruin Report Online, all getting a sense that things are really warming up here. So, Thriller, before we talk Washington, preview the game, and get into the X's and O's, really want to get your thoughts on Mr. Chesney here, the conversation, what you like, what you don't like, and just your overall assessment of if we go in this direction, how you feel about it.
Yeah, pouring into the research and knowing about this guy, seeing what he did at Holy Cross, seeing what he's doing at James Madison, following up, Curt Cignetti. That's not an easy guy to follow up with at James Madison, but I'm really impressed. And, I think one of the candidates I laid out earlier in our time was we needed a PJ Fleck-like type of guy where the energy and the results kind of show up. And Chesney checks both those marks completely. I really like what I've seen from him in, interviews, the game plans, all that stuff. What really impresses me about his time with James Madison is if you followed the Cignetti thing like you and I have, it's not like he's doing it with Cignetti's players. Cignetti took like 30 James Madison transfers. So he had to kind of build from scratch there. And he's got them better than what Cignetti had them there. They could be a playoff team, Madman. Think about how crazy that is with the current construct of James Madison. I didn't even think those words were ever going to come out of my mouth. If Chesney could be doing this with James Madison, he can easily do this with the recruiting landscape of UCLA and how he's developing these players. We're all looking for the next Cignetti. This guy clearly looks like he is that candidate for this cycle where you see the stems, you see the background. You're kind of like, I like this guy. I like what he brings to the table. East Coast guy, a lot could happen up until now, especially with the coaching job. Still, we talked about Penn State needs a coach. Where is Bob Chesney from? He's from Pennsylvania. So I am all in on the Bob Chesney train. I'm also all in on the other guy. My top two coaches are like one's across from us and one is already rumored to be confirmed coming to us. If it's between those two guys and we get one of those guys, it's the rare win-win situation where UCLA could be happy. So listen, Chesney, I'm all in on. If we can actually bring this into a deal and get him in the UCLA football sidelines, I think it has a chance to be a home run.
No, Thriller, I completely agree with you. And, talked about this a little earlier, but I think the way college football is set up now, I think it's harder and harder to justify hiring a flashy coordinator to then take the head coaching job. Now, obviously, coordinators have to be head coaches eventually, so it's got to be a really sort of exceptional person. But the fact that Chesney, I'd rather take a guy who can do the entire job, even if it's at a lower level, and then up the level rather than up the scope, to your point. And it's such a subtle point that you made because Cignetti took the whole roster of James Madison, 30-plus players to Indiana.
Guys,
I mean, and Chesney had to rebuild that whole roster, and here he is in year 2, and they got it absolutely humming right now with an opportunity for some really grandiose things, to your point. And so he's won everywhere he's been, 44-21 at Holy Cross, and just done things the right way. I think he sort of really aligns with Bruin values. I think he's sort of, under the radar. He's sort of an underdog. It just really checks a lot of the boxes. And you have to believe that this search committee construct that Chancellor Frank has put together, the fact that they're thinking in this way, in a more strategic way, with Peters, with Myers, with Wasserman and Kendricks, you have to be really encouraged by this type of thinking. And I think that's what's got, Bruin fans pleasantly surprised and really, really excited about what the future is to hold. And I think, Thriller, the big question is going to be, what does Penn State want to do? Because for a guy who is from Pennsylvania native, Northeast, we talked about James Madison. He was affiliated with Johns Hopkins earlier. This is a Northeast through and through guy. Penn State's been really playing it close to the vest. We're just not hearing what's going on. Ironically enough, Matt Rule was sort of tied to the job a little bit earlier. Nebraska re-upped him. So we don't really know where Penn State's head is. And that's the only one that makes me a little nervous because outside of that one, which would presumably be his dream job, I think Chesney would jump at the opportunity to be a UCLA Bruin. And the fact that this Cignetti model worked in the way that it has at Indiana, and you think about Indiana's history the last 80 years and UCLA football's history the last 80 years, and you look at how quickly Cignetti was able to do it at Indiana, bringing all of these transfers over and not starting from scratch. Because, Thriller, like we talked about, look, this is a 2-year rebuild. We have a long way to go, particularly in the trenches. Quality and quantity of talent has been a struggle. But even despite that, think about Cortland Ford, Unajay, DeGiorgio. We lose those guys on the offensive line. Gary Smith III, Keanu Williams, Busic, Keshawn Bennett, Apu. We lose those guys on the defensive line. And so no one has necessarily been a world beater in that group, but you're really starting from scratch on both trenches. We don't know where Nico's head is going to be in 10 days. He's been through so much. You got to believe that he's going to at least test the open market a little bit. So you're really starting from scratch here. And the fact that a guy like Chesney has built it in such a quick period of time in James Madison, I think that's what gets us so excited. And, man, it would really be a home run. Either he or Fish, I think you and I are on the same boat. And I think he brings a little bit of even more than what Fish would bring on one dimension, and that is not being the flight risk that Jed Fish could potentially be with sort of an eye for that next job.
Completely agree, man. And it's these two guys. These are the two that I would feel very comfortable with UCLA coming in. With how the program currently stands for UCLA, missing back-to-back playoff appearances, the lack of fans showing up for the games, just little things that have kind of just continually set us back. We need a program builder, and this guy has done it at multiple stops throughout his career. And I just think this is the guy. This is the guy. The Fish thing, as much as I love him, and we're going to dive into that in just a second, you're always worried about, is he going to hop? Is he going to hop in 2 years like he's done pretty much everywhere he's been his entire coaching career, even as a coordinator? So it's always going to be in the back of your mind with Fish. I think if we can get it right with Chesney, it could be very similar to what, and granted, different circumstances, but what Kenny Dillingham has done at Arizona State.
Yeah.
It's like higher. If you take the risk on a guy that's willing to stay and put in the work, it could be a home run and you get to keep him in the long haul, which is a double victory in the long grand scheme of things. So Chesney, I'm very, very intrigued by it. I hope Penn State, the rumor is Brian Dable might be considered for this because he was a Nick Saban offensive coordinator in college, rose the ranks in the NFL. He's not going to get an NFL job next year. And if he wants to keep coaching, it's going to be at the college level. Penn State's got a blank checkbook for this guy. I could see it potentially happening with Dable, but man, just give us Chesney. We'll do whatever it takes.
Give us Chesney, indeed, Thriller. And so perfect segue there. Now we talk about in the other corner, the blue corner, the purple corner, I should say, Jedd Fisch coming in with 7-3 Washington here, kind of with this air of mystery, isn't it, Thriller? Washington kind of coming in 7-3. They're quietly putting together a really nice season in terms of year 2 of the Fisch tenure, which is sort of what we expected given how quickly he can do things. But there's sort of this air of what's really going to happen with that LSU Florida dynamic, and Lane Kiffin seems to be the belle of the ball right now, Thriller, and he gets to sort of get his pick of the litter.
He's been enjoying it too.
He's been enjoying it. He's been enjoying it, as only Lane can. Lane's going to sort of enjoy it. Reports that his family, private jet to Baton Rouge, to Gainesville. Lane's got his choice. Does he stay at Ole Miss? Does he take the LSU job? Does he take the Florida job? And I think there's a scenario here, Thriller, where if he either stays at Ole Miss or takes the LSU job, feels like Florida's focus is going to shift entirely to Jedd Fisch if they can't get Lane Kiffin given the ties. So things to monitor. You're worried about Penn State and Chesney. You're worried about Florida and Fisch. So the timing all has to come together. And so curious to sort of get your thoughts there. But on the field, Thriller, Jedd Fisch comes in, the Bruin killer, if you will, between his time at Washington, his time at Arizona. Hard to believe now, but it was really that loss 2 years ago at Arizona, that started this whole thing. I mean, if you think about sort of the soap opera that has been UCLA football over the last 25 months, let's call it, it really began with that loss at Arizona to Jedd Fisch. That loss was then followed up with the home loss to Arizona State. Then obviously, the big win against SC, then the drubbing against Cal. I mean, that's where this whole circus sort of began. Fisch always seems to have his fastball for UCLA. Well reported. He wanted that job. He wanted to be where Chip Kelly was, wanted this program to pick him over Chip. Program goes in a different direction. He doesn't get the opportunity even on the other side of Chip, given all of those timelines and decisions that we've talked about at length over the last few months. Now he takes the Washington job. In year 2, DeMond Williams looks like a Kyler Murray 2.0. Guy's an absolute stud throwing and running the ball. He had nearly 500 yards of total offense against Rutgers. And now you're in a situation where against this patchwork defense, having to deal with a DeMond Williams along with the big bruising running back Jonah Coleman in this 1-2 punch. Very formidable task here, Thriller, for this defense. And so how do you see this thing play out? How do you feel about the environment? Oh, by the way, it's potentially the last game UCLA plays in the Rose Bowl. You got all of this stuff, this circus sort of going around the game, if you will. How do you feel about the atmosphere in the game itself?
It's going to be a very interesting ball game. And I think I'm hoping the UCLA team rallies in what is potentially the last game at the Rose Bowl. This is a special game for all the seniors that have been here for a long time, people that have been within the program. I mean, the Rose Bowl is such a sacred place, man, and it sucks to lose it. So I want to see this team rise. The thing that impresses me most about Jedd Fisch, they're 7-3 this year. Remember, he inherited a team that went to the national championship the year before, where the coach took the job at Alabama. They had lost their star quarterback, 3 best receivers, ton of transfers out of there. Their two best offensive linemen. Braylon Trice was amongst the best edges in the country when he was at Washington. He left. They made a bowl game last year, and he's building upon to maybe improve to 2 more wins to be about 8-3 heading into that Oregon game to close out the season, which is a home game. What it separates him, man, is the offense is top 40 in the country and the defense is top 25. This is a good team, man. You know, when you look at it, they're 25th in the nation in scoring offense, and they're averaging about 34.3 points a game. And then when you look at what they're doing on defense, man, they're top 20 in points per game allowed, top 20 in the country in rush defense, 21st in total defense, allowing 313.7 yards a game. I mean, this is frankly a really good team and a better coaching job at that. And on top of it, if I am putting early odds for next year's Heisman candidates, DeMond Williams might be at the top of that list, man. 17 touchdowns through the air, 5 on the ground, 500 yards rushing. You nailed it, man. We've talked about it before. He is like Kyler Murray 2.0. It's kind of how I felt when I saw Trae Young compared to Steph Curry, where it's like, maybe it's not the full product, but there's so much similarities there that you see it. And that's how I feel with DeMond. So he's got the quarterback. He's got the offense rolling. He's got the defense, maybe even playing even better. What I do like with UCLA here is Nico's going to be back to this game. Nico is the last real home game of your career at UCLA. Could be for UCLA, right? We talked about it. He's probably going to be at least testing the portals to see what could happen there. Nico wants to go out with a bang. I know the competitive nature. He's been so impressive through all the BS that has been thrown his way this year. So if we got Nico out there, I feel like we got a chance. I think Jerry and Mazzoni can scheme up a good game for us. I do think Washington's going to pull out this one. It's the head and the heart argument. I saw you do this earlier. My head is telling me that Washington's going to win, but my heart's telling me if Nico can string together a couple drives, we get Quasi and Rico involved, we get the run game flowing like we did on that 3-game win streak, we're going to have a shot in this ball game. So that's kind of my 2 cents with it. Jed Fish remains a Bruin killer. Hopefully not, but we'll see what happens, man. What do you think about that prediction? And I want to hear yours as well.
No, Thriller. I mean, you said it so well and laid it out so beautifully. I think this is the 3rd best team UCLA's played this year.
Wow.
If you think about it, right? I mean, sitting at 3-7, this is game 11. We had always said the 2 most unattainable games were Ohio State and Indiana. But if you look at the rest of the schedule, so much of the rest of the schedule was about what UCLA didn't do than necessarily who their opponent was. Now, the one exception is you could argue maybe Utah, right? Like Utah, Washington, it's a debate. Who would be a better team? But the fact that we're even going to have that sort of debate, and remember, after that first game, you and I said, look, Utah's a team that could play in the college football playoff. And here is Utah sitting right now, top 15, knocking on the door, and if they get into the Big 12 championship game, all bets are off. They can get in. So they're right there in terms of our prediction at the start of the season. And truthfully, Thriller, I think Washington would have been right there too. They kind of laid an egg at Wisconsin 2 weeks ago that really sort of cost them really a dark horse opportunity to make the college football playoff as potentially the 4th team in the Big Ten. So the fact that we're sort of having this conversation, I think Washington is more balanced than Utah is. I think they're a more all-around team, and it's at least a conversation. So you're going up against a really, really good group. And to your point, Thriller, they're pretty whole defensively, and then offensively between DeMond Williams, Jonah Coleman, and then Denzel Boston, their experienced wide receiver. There's a lot there. There's a lot there. And quite frankly, I mean, even in their 2 losses, they played Ohio State and lost 24-6, but they only gave up 24 to Ohio State. It wasn't like Ohio State sort of ran away with a 40, 50-point performance. And so this is going to be a really tall order. I think the fact that this is at home, I think the fact that there's so much emotion with this team, with Nico's potential farewell of the Rose Bowl. And I think also, is this Jerry Neuheisel's last game at the Rose Bowl as the offensive coordinator of UCLA for a while, until he potentially finds his own path and hopefully comes back to UCLA as we believe and know that he will. But for a while, it's going to be emotional on a lot of elements. And so can they conjure up that sort of Penn State mojo, if you will? And I completely agree with you. On paper, statistically, pragmatically, logically, it feels like Washington's the better team on both sides of the ball and, should be able to win this game by 10 to 14 points. But that's the beauty of college football. Can the emotions sort of get the best of you? And DeMond, for as good as he is, he can be erratic at times. He's still young. On the road, can you get these guys in a turnover-prone situation? Look, they were susceptible to it against Wisconsin. They were turnover-prone at times at home again on the road against Maryland earlier in the year. Look, they had to pull that game out. Maryland had them 20-0, a team that UCLA beat. So there's a world here, Thriller, where UCLA, if they can kind of get going, Nico can run, and kind of get some balance. We get flowing offensively. Crowd gets into it. You get a couple turnovers. Now you can sort of swing the game and potentially steal it 30-27. But I'm with you. The head is saying in sort of flashing lights, this is sort of a Washington victory. But the heart is telling me UCLA, as it always is.
Yes, sir, man. And we're like, would you say we're better than Wisconsin? Because if Wisconsin could beat them, we could throw our hat in that ring.
Absolutely.
I say yes because we have Nico, and Nico gives us a shot if he's on his A game. So that's where I would say that is that X factor. If Nico is playing how he played in that 3-game stretch, like we could beat a lot of teams in this conference. So never say never, never say die. But yeah, I would favor Washington coming into this game. But man, if you could walk out with a win at the Rose Bowl, kind of, stalling the progress of Washington this season, what a way to go out, man.
What a way to go out. What a way to go out, Thriller. And I'll leave us with this. Wayne said something interesting a couple of weeks ago where he said, it was almost worse for UCLA to play Latif in Nebraska versus Raiola in Nebraska because, in a sense, Nebraska sort of knew their limitations. They were like, look, we're not really going to throw the ball. We're not really going to be trying for the vertical pass game. We're just going to turn around and pound the ball and then just bootleg and be super safe. And that was kind of the game plan that Utah had earlier in the year. Like, we're not going to really try and throw the ball. We're going to keep it really conservative in between the tackles, and we're going to attack that way. And I think that's how you beat this UCLA defense. We've talked about it so much with the challenges in that front seven. Washington doesn't play that way, though. Even though they got the thumper in Coleman, they could just easily kind of turn around and give the ball to Coleman 35 times. But because DeMond Williams is so dynamic, they're going to dial up some other things. They're going to get him out in space. They're going to try some things. So that sort of opens you up sometimes, not just to turnovers, but to holding penalties, to sort of get behind the chains. And you're almost playing into the hands of UCLA because you're not exploiting their weaknesses. So I think for UCLA to win this game, I think Washington would need to be a little bit more erratic in terms of their offensive choices. And that's something to really watch for in this particular game.
Yeah, and I think with the Latif situation, just to be brief on that, the biggest advantage a young quarterback has is not having film on him out there.
Right.
It was impossible to prepare for him. You didn't know what style you were getting. You can look at the high school highlights, but that's completely different. It's the age-old tale in the NFL, too. I remember, I'm a 49ers fan. Kaepernick was unstoppable the first year he was with the 49ers. They got some film on him. He kind of went back down to earth, and it was never really the same for him after that. So I think we have at least film on DeMond Williams. What the defense does with that, frankly, this isn't the defense we were kind of hoping for, but you got film on him. This is a kind of throw the kitchen sink at the game. Kevin Coyle, NFL defensive coordinator mind. That's what I'd be doing. I'd be pouring hours in this offense, watching what DeMond Williams does with the football in his hands and seeing how he could stop it. If he could do that, if Coyle comes up with a good game plan, it's anybody's ball game.
Anybody's ball game. So fans, pack that Rose Bowl. Pack it as you would. It's not just the Rose Bowl. It's the Fish Bowl. Saturday night. Pack the Fish Bowl, and last time potentially at the Rose Bowl. Let's really enjoy this iconic venue one more time. The beautiful San Gabriel Mountains, the sunset, the tailgating, the golf course, just everything that makes this place so magical and special. And let's see what happens. You got to play the games. You got to roll the balls out there. and the emotions of college football with these 18 to 22-year-olds. You never know. And with a guy as talented under center as Nico Iamaleava, you always have a shot. And so fans, as always, Thriller and me always got your back. We bleed UCLA. Be loud, be proud, be passionate, Bruins. And like we always say, 4's up forever, baby.
Hey, what's up, Bruin family? And thank you, as always, for making the Bruin Bible a part of your daily listen. Got to tell you quickly about our friends over at Sleeper. It's the #1 sports app on the App Store or Google Play. And when you go to download the app today and you go to make your first deposit, make sure to use our promo code UCLA LAFB, all one word, UCLA LAFB. They're going to match your deposit up to $100. You put in $100, you get $100 free to play with. And when you get that money in there, go do the daily fantasy. You're just going to choose 2 to 8 players across any sport and just choose more or less. So if you're looking at UCLA, Nico Iamaleava, are you choosing more or less passing yards? You can go pros with the Rams, with the Chargers, choose more or less for touchdowns, receptions. You go with baseball, NBA, NHL, anything you want is right there on the Sleeper app. Plus, right now, they're giving new users a $20 free entry, no deposit required. So you can get $20 free immediately for signing up and then stack that offer with our UCLA LAFB promo code and get that match bonus. So head to Sleeper, download it, tell them the guys at the LAFB network sent you.